Electricast.
This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Whether you're selling a little or a lot, Shopify helps you do your thing, however you cha-ching. From the launch your online shop stage, all the way to the we just hit 1 million orders stage. No matter what stage you're in, Shopify's there to help you grow. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/special offer, all lowercase. That's shopify.com/special offer.
Why wait to see if you'll get something you like this Valentine's Day when you can go to BlueNile.com and find something you'll love? Whether you're looking to treat yourself to a little winter sparkle or show a galentine how much you appreciate them, Blue Nile offers a wide selection of high-quality designs, expert guidance, and free 30-day returns for the ultimate peace of mind. You can even design your own jewelry. Right now, save up to 50% at BlueNile.com. That's BlueNile.com.
On this episode of Missing the Point, we're joined by Annie O'Donnell from the OD on Sports podcast. We'll discuss Shoehai Ohtani as the new face of baseball and Stephen A. Smith's comments on the subject, discuss the Trevor Bauer legal problems, the NHL Expansion Draft for the Seattle Kraken, and the most important subject of all, our favorite Mighty Ducks movies. This is Missing the Point, episode 73. But it's all relative.
Welcome, everybody, into Missing the Point. My name is Joe Malkin. I'm joined tonight by Mike Marcangelo, as always, our executive producer, Craig D'Alessandro. And we have a fun guest, a very anticipated guest that we reached out to just a couple days ago on a whim. And, I've wanted to invite her on here for a while, and Craig got it done. So Annie O'Donnell, content creator, sports analyst, host of the OD on Sports podcast, where she has a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts, co-host of Sports Sunday on 101.5 FM KOCI in Orange County, self-proclaimed sports fan, and it's true. She talks the hottest topics in sports by herself with a guest or on Missing the Point, and provides tips for navigating through the crazy, emotional, fun life of being a sports fan. She's at Sweet Annie OD on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, where she has 20.8 thousand followers at the time of recording this. Annie O'Donnell, welcome to Missing the Point.
Wow, what an introduction. I feel like I need to update my podcast description a little bit now that I wrote that when I literally first launched and had no idea what I was doing. I was like, I've done a little bit. I should probably update that, but I am awesome. I'm so excited to be here. How are you guys?
We're doing great. We're hanging in there. We're doing an East Coast, West Coast thing here. And Mike, past your bedtime, but how are you?
I'm doing well. I'm here for this 90s rap vibe. East versus West. This is going to be great.
It's 80s Celtics versus Lakers. So Annie, we didn't ask you much about basketball. Are you a Lakers fan? We know you're a Dodgers fan.
I am a diehard Lakers fan.
Diehard Lakers fan. Okay. Well, as long as it's not with the era of King James, then we're fine, because we don't mind Kobe around here.
As you shouldn't. Kobe's my guy. So Kobe. You can't not grow up in Southern California and not love, and especially in the 90s, and not just fall in love with the Lakers. That's why I don't trust anyone that says they are diehard Celtics fans. I was like, how? That's why when Paul George, he was like, oh, I've been a Clipper fan my whole life. I was like,
no, you haven't.
You're from Southern California in the 90s, and you're telling me you saw Kobe and Shaq balling out for the purple and gold, and you were like, nah, I'm going to go with the Clip. No. Lies.
And you know as well as we do that professional athletes lie just so that people will buy tickets and sit in the seats. It's what I mean. If you're listening to this and that's a surprise to you, well, we're sorry, but you've been lied to your whole lives. But you're not wrong, because when we were growing up in the 90s, it was Kobe, and then in Boston, of course, we had Paul Pierce and Antoine Walker and those guys, but they were no Kobe, and Kobe was great. Shaq was awesome, and we had Shaq here for a cup of coffee in Boston, and the year after we won the championship?
I think it was 2010, or it was right around that. It was like Fat Shaq. It was Big Mac Shaq. You know what I mean?
Yeah. He couldn't hit a shot to save. I mean, he never could hit a shot.
Right. I was going to say that was never.
Yeah, no. So Annie, welcome in, and we're happy to have you. This is fun because we get to touch on some talking points that we're never shy around here when it comes to talking about the more controversial things in sports. And I want to start with one of them, and that's the Stephen A. Smith comments about Shohei Ohtani being the face of baseball, and the fact that he kind of backtracked from a couple weeks ago. But again, how this kind of all started was we saw your TikTok on that. I sent it to the guys, and we were like, we got to get her on. Let's talk about this. So what are your thoughts on, one, Stephen A. Smith's comments, and two, Shohei Ohtani being the face of baseball?
Let me start by just saying, because I know we're all briefly connected, that in the past, I've been a huge advocate of Stephen A. Smith. I've been a huge fan of his. I think he's entertaining. I think he provides a lot of insight in the sport of basketball. Football, his takes are a little but basketball for sure. You got to respect, he started in Philadelphia. He was watching tapes. He knows his stuff with basketball. So I give him credit where credit's due. He's not where he is by accident. And I mean, to further prove that, I do have a Stephen A. Smith mug right here of the many faces of him with a coffee.
That's awesome.
I think that's tea, actually. He's a tea man. And there's certain, I feel like at times, you can, I don't want to say, I don't idolize him, but I want to say you can, admire people, look up to them while still holding them accountable and, not agreeing with everything they do and everything they say.
Sure.
And that's a big part of my podcast. And that's why I love that you say that, you don't shy away from any controversial topic, because I think that's one of the best things about, for one, being an independent podcaster myself, is I can talk about whatever I want to and nothing's off the table and I can say what I want. But in terms of, I had so many thoughts in my head when I saw the video of Stephen A. saying, it doesn't help the game of baseball that their number one guy, the guy that's basically the modern Babe Ruth, needs an interpreter. And that was I had to rewatch it like twice just to make sure that I rewatched it more than twice, obviously, but I had to rewatch it a couple times just to make sure I heard that right. I said, how you're in 2021? Are we still saying this?
But this isn't new stuff either, right? Like, we talk about the interpreter, but first of all, what does it matter? And second of all, we've had that before. We've had it in Boston. We've had it with so many players, whether it was Daisuke Matsuzaka or Byung-Hyun Kim, who was in the league long before he got to Boston and still needed an interpreter when he got here. And that's just Asian-based players, where there's been so many South American, Caribbean players. Rafael Devers needed an interpreter when he first got here 6 years ago. So you're right. It's 2021. What's the problem?
And I feel like, I just remember one of my favorite images in like Dodger history is Hiroki Kuroda. I don't know if you remember him. He's a pitcher. And he played with the Yankees a little bit, so maybe you had to face him here and there. But Hiroki Kuroda, the Dodgers used to do this thing where the rookies would wear wear ridiculous costumes near the end of the year. And Hiroki Kuroda had his interpreter also dress up in a costume too. And he was just like, these interpreters, they travel with them. They're a part of the team. They're a part of this growing family of a franchise. And it was just so, I guess I could kind of see where he was as far as marketability, but like, nobody's going to watch Shohei Ohtani. Nobody's going to watch Mike Trout because they saw him in a commercial. Like, I just thought that was so stupid. And I know in that TikTok I rattled, the examples are endless of athletes that either English isn't their second language or isn't their first language, or they use an interpreter. I mean, the biggest one for me is Canelo, who is easily, he's the face of boxing. I got a lot of snarky comments about that from the boxing community in TikTok, but I digress.
Who did they think the face of boxing was?
They'll say Floyd Mayweather. I was like, you can't be the face of boxing when you're.
All right, he might need an interpreter too, though.
Someone was like, yeah, he might need an interpreter to help him read to read him. So I was like, that's good.
Weren't you going for like the active face of boxing?
Yeah.
It's Canelo.
I took it.
I mean, if you want to throw, for heavyweights, you want to go Tyson Fury, you want to go Anthony Joshua, sure. But like overall, Canelo's the guy. Yes. I've seen Canelo fight in person at Madison Square Garden. There is no question in my mind that he is the biggest face in boxing right now. And he uses an interpreter, but he's got fans from all over the world. I got into boxing because I watched the Canelo Triple G fight, and that's what got me into a boxing gym. Like, you can grow the game, whatever sport game you're in, without speaking the native language, because one of the best things about sports is, there is communicating with your teammates, doing interviews, but game respects game. Like, The game itself is a language. So kids are going to be out there pretending to be Shohei Ohtani because he rakes, because he's great on the mound. They're going to go out there. They're going to want his jersey because he's a great player. And who doesn't want to be an all-around player like that? They're not going to, you don't say, oh, he needs an interpreter. No, we're not getting his jersey. No, we don't support him. No, I can't relate to you because you don't, you need an interpreter. So stupid.
And this is what you mentioned. You mentioned Canelo having fans all over the world, and my mind immediately went to Hideki Matsui. It went to Manny Pacquiao when he first came over. Yeah. Ichiro Suzuki. I mean, Ichiro Suzuki in the early 2000s. There was a commercial where they had I think it was for like 47 brand. It was for hats or jerseys or something. And they had a guy, not a sponsor. They had a guy in the commercial that was like, it's one of my favorite things to do on this podcast is to say a brand and then say they're not a sponsor. But that doesn't mean we wouldn't like you to be. And it was Ichiro is number one. And it's like, we've already kind of broken that barrier. And right. The biggest thing that we've heard over the years is that they want to grow the game of baseball in Asia, in South America. Basketball has been growing in China for decades. They've tried to grow it in even North Korea, sending Dennis Rodman over. Are you telling me Dennis Rodman didn't need an interpreter to talk to Kim Jong-un? So I might be stretching it a little, but the point is,
right.
We're past that. And you're right. I don't care if Shohei Ohtani can speak English. The fact of the matter is he just pitched and hit during the All-Star game. And it made me happier to see a big, shining, smiling face on the mound playing baseball than it did for anything else.
I think talent just transcends everything, right? I think that's like the message that I would have. And I think that you too, Andy, like in that TikTok, it's just like when you listed off all the people that need an interpreter, but are still the best at what they do and have all that recognition. To put it in perspective, Mike Trout has been probably one of the most prolific MLB players for the last 8 years. I couldn't pick him out of a lineup. I have no idea what he looks like. I actually don't even care about him. Like I would never. His marketability for me is zero. But Shohei, like this is a great story. Not only because, like you said, he rakes. But when was the last time that a starting pitcher of an All-Star game was not like the ninth batter? He was actually a damn good batter that you had to go against, right? It's like, so Stephen A., I get what he was saying. I guess this is my question to you. Like, I fundamentally disagree with his statement.
Right.
But what he was trying to say is it's hard to market somebody that is that with a language barrier. But again, to your point, in 2021, should we be worrying about this? Shouldn't we just let them go out there and just showcase their talent and then figure out if we like them or not?
Absolutely. I mean, nobody, like I said, I mean, sure, there's some, but I feel like, sorry, I'm backtracking here. I feel like the people that like the big personalities, and usually like, I think back to hockey players specifically, like you got those guys in the lineup that are just not very well, or we'll stick with baseball. Kike Hernandez. He's not a star, but he's got a big, he's one of the funniest guys in the league, such a bright personality. He'll throw a banana suit on to lighten up the mood, makes funny faces, loves to dance in the dugout. Like he's a guy that like diehard fans know about and love and will back and support. But, a guy like Shohei Ohtani, who's got the numbers, who's got just the on-field the on-field production, the on-field results. Like that's what's going to get kids excited and want to grow the game. Kids are going to see all the, guys hit a home run while I was there. I'm a fan now. And I think about one example that I didn't bring up in that TikTok, but I wish I did, was the Russian 5 for the Detroit Red Wings. A time when none of those guys spoke English. I think about Pavel Datsyuk, who barely spoke a lick of English. But I can tell you, I knew numerous children that were wearing Datsyuk jerseys, that were imitating his shootout moves, that wanted to shoot like him. So they're really, especially when it comes to, I believe, growing the game and marketing the sport, you got to start with the youth. That's grassroots. That's who you're marketing to. And, kids get excited by those things. They get excited by guys like Shohei Ohtani. They don't, like I said, they don't care about commercials. They don't care about print places. Like I get it. Major League Baseball has a problem with marketing their game. There's it's on a laundry list of problems for this. But I really think as far as Shohei Ohtani, they need to be marketing him more, but it's not, don't let the language barrier stop you from doing that. That's all I'm saying.
Like you said, he's kind of transcendent, and Major League Baseball is being given a layup here. They're literally being given the best opportunity they have in recent memory to market their game and get people, whether it's people our age or kids, to pay attention to the game. You're absolutely right. You said it best. So, I'm not going to circle back around on your words, but you're absolutely right. And, Mike, as you said, Stephen A., you kind of fundamentally have to disagree with him. I am not the biggest Stephen A. guy. I think it's more because I am a bigger fan of Stephen A. than I am of Skip Bayless. I think Skip Bayless is not good at all. And the fact that he has burner accounts to argue with himself on Twitter is hilarious. Him and Kevin Durant. But Mike, always get one out of Mike. But besides that, Stephen A. is fine. But yeah, I agree. I mean, this was just this was a little too far. And if they're gonna find somebody to be the face of baseball right now, it's not Mike Trout, it's him. And if Mike Trout is smart, he will jump on Shohei Ohtani's coattails and ride him into the sunset.
I feel like Mike Trout's that kind of guy too. Absolutely.
Sure. Yeah. A good opportunity. And he's wanted to stay in LA. And I mean, so here's a question on top of all of this. Do you think there's a problem with sports in general, because we see it in football as well? We see bigger players oftentimes stay in the Eastern or Central time zone. And I know this seems silly, but it's true, right? Of course, like you see kind of everybody, but we don't see everybody because LeBron James and Shohei Ohtani don't play until 11 o'clock at night on the East Coast. So we're not watching them. Do you think that's a problem in sports?
Yes, absolutely. And I say that, it's funny you bring that up because let me put it this way. I grew up in Southern California. I've lived in Pittsburgh. I've lived in Chicago. I've lived in New York. I've checkmarked almost every time zone off the list except Mountain Time in Hawaii, but I don't see myself doing that anytime soon. I digress. And I just think about it in terms of I'll speak for the Ducks fan base that I know and love very well, is the majority of Ducks fans that I know are very well versed in the league as a whole. Like they know what's going on. They know who players are on each team. And while I've met a lot of passionate hockey fans in Pittsburgh, Chicago, and New York, not all of them know what's going on in the league. Not all of them know what's going on in the West Coast. And that's not necessarily their fault. Like you said, games are on at 11 o'clock at night. The only time they see these West Coast teams play is when they have to stay up at 10:30 at night just to watch their team. Sure. So I definitely think it's a problem, but I mean, in the case of Shohei Ohtani, I have to remember, you got to remember that he picked where he wanted to go. Yeah, he picked the Angels for a reason. I love that Dave Roberts even said, he's like, someone asked, how do you feel that you missed on him? He says, yeah, we wanted him, but he didn't pick us. he picked to go to the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim, which I don't know if you guys have ever been to California, but let me just state very clearly that Angel Stadium is very clearly in Anaheim, California. It is right across the freeway from Honda Center where the Anaheim Ducks play. So this whole Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim thing, I still don't understand it. It's the stupidest move.
I think they are the team in sports that have changed their name the most in American sports, at least.
Oh, the Anaheim teams for sure. The California Angels, the Anaheim Angels, Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim. Then you got the Mighty Ducks of Anaheim, the Anaheim. It's ever changing. Who knows what's next? Well, but
we'll get to the Ducks because we have some Ducks related questions for you. Oh. But so we'll get there. But I just stepped all over your point there. But
no, you're good.
So I hesitate. I'm totally I have this tendency once during a show of killing a mood. But I want to bring this guy up because it's also LA based. And you mentioned Dave Roberts. So we have to bring this name up and we have to bring this story up.
Okay.
Trevor Bauer.
Ugh.
Okay. I know. We have the same opinion on Trevor. We all have the same opinion on Trevor Bauer. What are your thoughts? Hope we would. right. Yeah. Andy's going to sign off real quick if we don't. No.
I wouldn't sign off. We'd have a discussion for sure. But
well, let's have a discussion anyway, because it's a hot button topic and they just extended his suspension, administrative leave through July 27th.
Hold on. The key part of that, though, Joe, is paid administrative leave.
Paid, yeah. He's still
Paid
getting
administrative leave, which is something that people who make a lot of money are afforded to, that some other people are not. You're in LA, San Diego, so you're kind of boots on the ground, for lack of a better term here. What are your thoughts on the Trevor Bauer situation?
Every time I've been asked this question, I do feel the need to kind of clear the air on my stance, because when the Dodgers first signed Bauer, personally, honestly, the reigning Cy Young winner, I was excited. Anyone that's going to suit up in Dodger blue, I want them to do well. I'm going to root for their success. And in terms of his past tweets and, the whole ordeal with him harassing women on Twitter, I'm of the belief that we can change, that we can improve ourselves as people. So I said, who am I to say that this young man can't either? I say young man, I think he's older than me, but who am I to say this guy can't improve himself and grow as a person either? So I said, well, I'll give him a chance. I'll root for him. He's a Dodger. He's on our team. However, that stance does not come into play in terms of domestic violence and what I read by The Athletic. That was absolutely horrific. I think every Dodger fan that I've spoken to, I know it's not the collective view of the fan base, but I think it's of the majority, is that we're done with him. Honestly, at this point in time, this Dodgers team has been, and I hate bringing play into this on such a serious topic, but this Dodgers team, despite despite one of the top records in the league, they really haven't hit their stride in the first half of the season. They've been very inconsistent. So I think taking this distraction, and he is a distraction. He's, for lack of a better word, I mean, the vlogging, the internet stuff and everything. I think it's the best for the team to just move on, but I know that's not necessarily the way things have to happen, because of, there was a whole deal when everything came out and the Dodgers didn't say anything. And Dave Roberts said, well, our hands are tied because it's at the league level. And I understand that the Dodgers couldn't suspend him and they couldn't just outright kick him off the team. But Dave Roberts absolutely had in his jurisdiction to take him out of the rotation. Absolutely. He's suspended and sat players for worse. He sat Cody Bellinger for not hustling to second base one game back in 2018. He sat Yasiel Puig for showing up late to practice. You're telling me you can't take Trevor out of the game because of this entire, for one, just aside from the whole investigation, the fact that there's no way he's going to be focused on the game on that Sunday, and it's going to be a distraction for the locker room, if anything. But no, you're going to say, no, he's going to start on the mound. What's the message that you're sending to your fans, to Dodger fans who are a very diverse group? I feel like that's one of the most best things about sports, is just that, every fan base is just a melting pot of different income classes, races, backgrounds, whatever. But domestic violence and sexual assault affect everybody. So that message there, I thought, was communicated very poorly. Will he ever, do I think he'll ever see a major? It depends on how the investigation goes, and investigations take time, as we all know, but, I don't want him suiting up in Dodger blue ever again, regardless of how this goes down, because he didn't deny it. He said it did happen. It was just consensual. And I don't see him suiting up in Dodger blue at all. So I say, cut the ties as soon as you can. I do want him, if and when he's found guilty, and the process does it, I do want him to be held accountable and responsible, because there's a young woman who is dealing with probably hell right now, not only just physically from injuries, but emotionally, internally, trauma, all that. But yeah, I don't want to see him on a diamond, and I don't see another team taking a chance on him either. Frankly, I don't think it's worth it. I don't think any level of talent is worth it. I don't think the mess is worth it. And I think a lot of people are going to question Andrew Friedman and the due diligence that they did during the signing. I don't entirely blame him, because like I said, I kind of saw the tweets from years ago. I said, not great, but not illegal. Like, it's not illegal to be a douchebag. It's not illegal to be a jerk online, unfortunately. But it's one of those things where you look back and said, yeah, where was the stone left unturned? Where was there signs there that this was a problem? We'll never know. But yeah, I'm done with Trevor Bauer, and I'm done with his age. I'm done with Rachel Luba too. Honestly, I've been supportive of her because women in sports, and she's done great things. Yep. I root for her success, but the way she responded to this and the statement she put out there and releasing the text messages, trying to oust this woman, it's spineless to me.
And, on face level, I think we all agree on the fact that what happened was not okay. As Mike and I have an unofficial segment on all of our shows now of that's something you can't do, or what's you just can't do that. You can't say that. You can't do that. And there's so much left to find out in this story because for him personally, he, like you said, basically came out and said it did happen, but it was consensual. And she came out and said consensual to a point. And then that's where, when someone says there's a point and then they weren't comfortable with it, that's endgame. That's it right there. Yep. Anything that happens beyond that is not okay. And that's where Trevor Bauer crossed the line. I agree with you on Rachel Luba. I think, we have to go here because it is sports. It is people that are successful. Money talks. And for her, money was definitely a part of it. He is her biggest client. And for the second biggest,
him and Yasiel Puig.
Yeah, well, okay, well, all right. She just lost a few more points. I forgot Yasiel Puig was one of her clients.
Yeah, she don't have a great track record with her
client. No, I guess not. And then you look at Dave Roberts, and you mentioned pulling people out of the lineup for doing a lot less. I mean, we're talking about on-field stuff because he said hands are tied. It's at the MLB level. When he said hands are tied, I think he meant his hands are tied. I think the decision was above him. And as a father and a husband and someone who has, not been in that situation, but wouldn't you want to take a step back and be like, I don't really care. Like, he's not in my starting rotation, like take a stand. But then it comes down to money and a job for him.
To Annie's point, right? If you're going to bench someone for not hustling to second,
no, well, that's what I'm saying.
Like, can't you find it within you just to bench someone for essentially raping somebody? Like, if that's ever even thrown out there, like, okay, like, you're out until this is cleared up. Also, the MLB has the power to do a couple of interesting things, right? They could say, like, listen, during this investigation, like, because domestic violence is in there, it empowers them to transfer liabilities to the Dodgers. So if Manfred doesn't want to come down with the ruling, he can say, listen, like, you guys deal with it. Or what he could do, I'm interested for your take on this, Annie. What would you think about them voiding his contract? Is that the way that they should go?
I say this knowing that, I mean, I feel like they can't do anything. I mean, the MLB has to do its own investigation, and that has to all be cleared up. And you got to think there's going to be, I can't think of a situation where this doesn't proceed further and go into trial, because they basically said, hey, everything happened. It was just consensual. He's not going to plead. I'm a sports podcast. I'm not big into legal jargon or the legal process, but if it's put in the Dodgers' hands, which if Manfred does that,
I don't think he will, though.
My motto for Manfred is disappointed but not surprised.
Yeah, so exactly.
Every time when he goes low, he just finds more ways to just go lower on the list.
You mean when he was handing over an MVP trophy last year, 3 sheets to the wind?
Well, I'm sorry.
It's also like that. This is like, this would be right in his playbook, though, right? It's well, hey, I didn't do it. Like, it's not my responsibility. We transferred all the power to the Dodgers, and he can kind of pass the buck there. But are you familiar with Denny Nagel? You remember him back in like 2004?
I was gonna say that was way back.
Yeah.
So the Rockies were handed responsibility by Bud Selig, and they voided his contract for soliciting a prostitute. Right, just soliciting one. He may or not have done something with them. The problem here is that even though he pled out, and I think this could happen for the remainder of Bauer, is he still was paid 16 out of the 19.5 million of his contract. Yeah. So, like, I don't want to get we don't need to get on a soapbox here, but I think it's really important. Like, what are we saying to all those watching and listening out there? Is if you can have your contract voided, if you can be ousted from the league, and somehow, even though you still did it, you still get paid.
That just doesn't sit right with me. I agree. Right? And you know what? And honestly, I wouldn't put it past Manfred, because the entirety of his career has been decisions that he doesn't care about the lasting effects. He doesn't care about what's good for the game. He's like, hey, let's figure out the easiest way to a solution, easiest way to find an answer. So, temporary solution here. We saw it with the Astros. He promised immunity because he just wanted the story to get out there. So players are not held responsible for a player-driven scheme. And I feel that way with the sticky tack stuff too. There's an easy way to tell. There's got to be a better way to tell the difference between a rosin bag mixed with something and using spider tack. But Manfred doesn't want to do that. So he's just banning sticky substances altogether. It's stupid. And the lasting effects could be players injured. We've seen Tyler Glass now get injured. He's probably not going to be the last, unfortunately.
That's a subject, as you're trying to find your words, that's a subject that's really interesting to me because one, the baseballs that they use around the world, especially the Korean League, are already tacky. So they already are a little bit stickier. So these guys have that grip on a baseball. The leather that's used on baseballs in the United States it's too slippery. So This is why guys have always done this, but they've literally always done this. I mean, one of my favorite movies of all time is Major League. And there's the whole scene about him talking about literally like little jalapeno in the nose, and it's like if Manfred screwed that one up, he has screwed up in a lot of places since he took over for Bud Selig, and not that Bud Selig was a saint either, but Rob Manfred is not doing for the game what needs to be done. And you're right. If he surprises us all and turns this back around on the Dodgers instead of having Major League Baseball take responsibility for it, when Trevor Bauer was not only the NL Cy Young last year, which and I won't say this about other teams, but shortened season, what
like the Dodgers,
how good?
I mean, he was still pretty good.
I mean, he was pretty good, but he's been
your mouth.
What's that?
I said like the Dodgers.
No, but I already,
I said that the trigger.
Don't do that. Don't do that to me, Craig. You're going to get yourself in trouble. You're going to get me in trouble. But point being is that Major League Baseball needs to handle this because Trevor Bauer was one of the most sought after free agents in the offseason. And Chaim Bloom and the Boston Red Sox dodged a bullet by him going to LA. So that was definitely a good decision and a good move by Boston to not pursue him any further. But so
nice for you.
Yeah, it's great for us. Well, it's funny because we also got Kike Hernandez. So on to the NHL.
And
Wow.
That was a lot to digest right there.
Yeah, I tend to do that and I will frazzle people. But
Annie, if it makes you feel any better, we had Aaron Hernandez. So we have our own terrible players.
It's only one of the most notorious mass murderers.
Right.
I mean, we've also had a very well-known football team in the area that has cheated on multiple occasions. And yes, I will admit, as a Patriots fan, they have cheated. That doesn't mean we should take world championships away, but they have cheated. So into the NHL, your Ducks, our Bruins, did not find their way to the Stanley Cup Finals this year, but we did have a very strange Stanley Cup Finals in the NHL this year, and it was two Eastern Conference teams.
Yep.
Typical Eastern Conference teams that made it to the Stanley Cup Finals, the Tampa Bay Lightning, the Montreal Canadiens. We know how good Tampa was, and we'll talk about them, but I want to talk to you about Montreal because this Montreal team was sneaky good. They weren't great at one thing, but they had Carey Price.
Very beginning of the season, one of the things that I said was that the Montreal Canadiens, I thought from the offseason, were the team that by and far built off the momentum they built in the playoffs in the return to play in the bubble. And, beating Pittsburgh in, 4 games, because it was a best of 5. So they took down the Penguins in 4, a series where nobody had them winning that series, and gave the Flyers a good run for their money. I've props to the Canadians, props to, Mark Bergevin for saying, hey, let's add some momentum here, going out, getting Joel Edmondson, getting Corey Perry, getting Jake Allen, obviously the addition of Cole Caulfield coming up obviously helped, but no, this is a Montreal Canadiens team that, they struggled a little bit near the end of the season, were able to slip into that 4th spot, that they had a lot of bright spots during the season. They showed a lot of potential, and Carey Price obviously playing out of his mind in the playoffs certainly helped. Cole Caulfield, Nick Suzuki rising to the occasion, but also seeing the veteran presence of Eric Stahl and Corey Perry shine through. That fourth line I thought was outstanding, and they were just so fun to watch. It was so, maybe not you guys as Bruins fans, but it was very easy to root for the Montreal Canadiens during this round, and it didn't help. My dad is a lifelong diehard Habs fan, so it's like a universal second team.
Hang on a second. How did he become how is he a Canadiens fan?
So my dad's from Long Island, and he grew up in the original 6 era, did not like the Rangers, so he liked the Habs.
Fair enough. Easy enough.
He's also a Celtics fan, so he doesn't,
That's great.
Yeah, no,
so when does your dad want to? No, I'm just kidding. Well, you talk about Montreal, and Cole Caulfield is kind of an unsung hero in the NHL. He was kind of an MVP of the playoffs, and his team didn't win, and he had Carey Price, who was kind of overshadowing everybody on that Canadiens team. But you mentioned Suzuki, Caulfield. One thing that Montreal had that, say, like the Bruins didn't have is 4 solid lines up front.
Yep.
And each one of them could play. They kind of reminded me of the Bruins from the 2010-2011 era when they won the Stanley Cup, because they could do it all. No matter who you put on the ice, you knew that there was a threat there. And the one thing that Tampa Bay had over them, one is the fact that they have the gritty veteran Steven Stamkos, but Vasilevsky is him and Carey Price. I would just love to see them in a shootout. Just let everybody in the NHL take shots at them and see what happens. They're incredible. But what Tampa had was one of the best. They say that the top line for the Bruins might be the best in hockey. I don't know.
The perfection line. Yeah.
The perfection line. Right.
By the way, we hate that name. We
do hate that name.
You can't have that name and not produce
and not be perfect.
You can't have that name and not be good 5-on-5 and not produce in the playoffs. I love Pasta. You gotta love Patrice Bergeron. And I'm actually a big Brad Marchand fan, but perfection line, I'm like, oh, you're not. No, don't do that. Don't do that to yourself.
Well, it didn't help that we lost 2 of our biggest defenders, and when Chara left in the offseason, they didn't really replace him.
This is true.
That didn't help. But that top line for Tampa, I am convinced, was better than the top line for Boston, and I could get ripped for this, and I'm okay with it.
Honestly, it was, and one guy I didn't give a shout out to that I should because of recent news about him is Shea Weber. He played outstanding in those plays. If Carey Price didn't play out of his mind and would be a shoe in Conn Smythe if the Habs had won, it would have been Shea Weber. I think hands down. That guy throwing it. If you were skating past Shea Weber in the playoffs, you were going to get hit. You were going to get crushed. It is, which is typical when you play a guy like Shea.
Sure.
But the Tampa Bay Lightning, to me, I mean, they, for the most part, just that core stayed together from last year. So it really isn't a surprise to me that they repeated, and everybody wants to get up in arms about being over the cap, and Dougie Hamilton saying, 18 million over the cap. They weren't 18 million over the cap, for one, but it's not against the rules. Technically it's not. So to put a guy on long-term injured reserve and then bring him back for the playoffs, you add something at the deadline. The Blackhawks did it in 2015. And I remember at the time being upset because the Blackhawks beat the Ducks in the Western Conference Final to end up winning the Stanley Cup that year. But at the end of the day, that's part of the job of being a general manager, is just playing around with the cap, making it work. And, if you can find those loopholes, you do it. But no one's stopping other teams from not doing that. Granted, you don't have Nikita Kucherov to just at your expense. Not every team has a guy like Nikita Kucherov to bring back in the playoffs, but next year will be interesting. The cap, obviously the expansion draft next week is going to change a lot of things for a good number of teams. It'll be interesting to see what happens and how that shakes out. I don't think it'll end up being the way Vegas was, where they had so many top guys that had to be protected. That's why I feel like we would be seeing more side deals going on right now. I feel like that's why we're seeing a lot of buyouts. We're seeing trades, we're seeing retirements, we're seeing, trade rumors going around, because Ron Francis probably is tacking the price on really high to say, hey, you want to make a side deal? You want to tell me who I need to pick? You're going to have to pay for it. Sort of like how the Ducks did trading Shea Theodore to Vegas, but we won't talk about that. Luckily, the Ducks are not in that tough spot this year. So I'm going into this expansion draft breathing a little easier. But I feel like the expansion draft's one of those things where you don't see it often in sports. So even if you're not a huge hockey fan, it's something very intriguing to see how a new team is built. I know we've got from the Tampa Bay Lightning all the way to
That's fine, because this brings up a good point, because one, the hockey playoffs, I said it on Twitter the other day, the Stanley Cup is the best trophy.
Oh, absolutely.
Not just the best
the
looking,
hardest.
but the hardest one to go obtain, the best one to watch. Even if you're not a hockey fan, you watch it. And I playoff hockey is the best. But the great thing about hockey is the stories that come out of hockey. We see Zamboni drivers for the Hurricanes winning games in goal. And then expansion drafts, which are great in hockey, because I learned this about the Boston Bruins the other day. So I don't know if you know, but one of the rules in hockey for an expansion draft is that you have to protect a goalie.
Yep.
The Boston Bruins did not have a goalie to protect because Halak's deal is up.
Yep.
Tuukka's deal is up. And Swayman and Vladar, our two other goalies, don't have enough service time. So they went out and signed a guy who was working construction to come in and play goal for them in Providence, their AHL team, long enough so that they could protect him, so that they could have a goalie under protection for the expansion draft alone. That was the only reason. And those stories don't happen in football. They don't happen in basketball. And that's just what's great about hockey.
You don't have an emergency. Yeah, exactly. You don't have an emergency kicker in football. Right. You don't have. Yeah, exactly.
Probably should, though. It is the most important position on the field.
True. Well, that's I love when people are like, what's the easiest position to play in football? And people are like, kicker. And they're like, okay, kick the ball, kick a field goal. Nobody can do it.
Right.
Well, but also, I don't know if I necessarily want to be, rushing Tom Brady with Rob Gronkowski blocking me either. So, I mean, kicking is definitely not easy, but I'm a big fan of kickers. But now we've gone from the Tampa Bay Lightning to kickers. So, but yeah, what do you think about the NHL expansion draft and the name and the logo for the Seattle Kraken?
This is somebody I actually went to Seattle 2 weeks ago for the 4th of July weekend. And let me tell you, this city is buzzing, very excited about this team coming to Seattle. It's so cool. Even people that don't watch hockey, people that aren't into sports, they're like, oh, I'm so excited. We're on the wait list for season tickets. We're so excited. Never watched a game. I've never been to a game. So, but we got to support. We love Seattle, so we want to support our teams. And I feel like you got to think, if you live in Seattle, you got to root for the Vancouver Canucks, because that's the closest team. You got to think. Yeah, I think about that Stanley Cup final, how much travel time that was, like brutal. But I digress.
From Boston to Vancouver and back again.
Literally, I think about that. I'm like, ooh. I mean, and I thought Anaheim to Ottawa was bad. No, Vancouver to Boston was probably worse.
Anaheim to Ottawa is pretty bad, though.
That's pretty bad. But I think it's great. I'm a proponent for growing the game as somebody that lives in Southern California and grew up being the only person that could talk hockey. And I went to small high school, so really sports in my high school. I wanted more people to get into hockey. One of my biggest pet peeves about the fans and the people that love the game is that they try to gatekeep it too much. They'll cry about it not being covered on ESPN and all these things. But when ESPN does cover it, or when people do touch it, they're like, no, you can't do that. No, you don't know what you're talking. Like, it's such this toxic gatekeeping culture. And I hate it. I hate gatekeeping in all of sports, but I feel it's extra prevalent in hockey because it's that, oh, we're different. We're not a mainstream. We're not a top. Exactly. And so I'm excited. Granted, this is another division rival for the Anaheim Ducks here, but I would hope, I don't think they're going to be as big of a threat as Vegas, just given, for one, the talent that we know that's going to be out and exposed. Like, they're not going to pick up a Matt Duchene. They're not going to pick up Jeff Skinner. Ron Francis, I know it's been a little bit since he's been in the GM game, but I just don't see him doing that. But you don't have like a Marc-Andre Fleury being exposed. You don't have, I'm trying to think. Well, you don't have Shea Theodore going and hand it over to you. But the big guy was, of course, Marc-Andre Fleury. But, I just don't see that happening this year for Seattle, just given the names that are out there. But nonetheless, very exciting. The logo, I think, is very cool. And actually, one of my good friends, a fellow creator, is Chanel Keenan. I don't know if you've heard of her or know her.
I've not yet, but we're going to.
She's the intersectionality consultant for the Seattle Kraken. She's a big proponent of, she's in a wheelchair, I should point that, but she's a big proponent of, of making hockey more open and accepting to people with disabilities. So she's helping coordinate. She does a better job of explaining it than I do, but kind of being a consultant to the team for things that make it more accessible to people that it might not be.
If you're going to do that in any city in America, it's Seattle.
Exactly. They're doing all the right. I mean, they've got JT Brown as their color analyst. They've got the first African-American play-by-play guy in the league. Like, they're just doing some strong, they're really striving to make hockey for everybody and be very inclusive, which you got to love it. You got to appreciate it and, give a stick tap to it, but we'll see what Ron Francis is able to do come next week.
They'll be fun to watch. Go ahead, Mike.
Just taking a step back, we're talking about the Vegas team, right? I just want to know, as someone who's right there, because they're not as close to us as they are you, right. How incredible was it to see a team that was just created be on the brink of a championship so soon? What was that like? Because that doesn't happen in literally any other sport. I mean, there was the Jaguars in the NFL once, but like it has not happened in such a long time. So I just want to know, as a division rival, what was it like watching that?
That was actually the first, the Ducks were on a streak of winning the Pacific Division for 5 straight years, and it ended at the hand of the Vegas Golden Knights. But division, I would trade all those division banners for a Stanley Cup, so I don't tote on them too much. But as I went to a game in Vegas at T-Mobile Arena for my birthday that year, and they actually played the Caps, which ended up being the Stanley Cup final. But the atmosphere was just so cool. I mean, what they're doing, it's very Vegas, and the fans there, I mean, they get a bad rap on Twitter. I don't know why, but the fans that I spoke to were so friendly. They were just so excited. So many of them are from, like, we sat next to a guy that was from Chicago, grew up a Blackhawk, so he's like, oh, I like the I've lived here for 20 years, but I've been following the Blackhawks, and now we've got a team. So I'm a Vegas fan now. Or even fans that don't know, that are still new to the game, which honestly, one of my favorite things is, they talk about how loud T-Mobile Arena is. And meanwhile, I'm pretty sure it's just, they just cheer at everything. Like, they don't know. Like, Fleury clears the puck and they're like, yeah, let's go. Like, little thing, which, hey, you got to love the enthusiasm there. Yeah. And I'm all for people learning at their own pace and learning the game. I would never shame somebody for that. So that's all fine. But, I think it was shocking because not one person expected anything out of this Vegas team. I would say the one person that probably did was George McPhee, who built the team. And, it is cool to see. I do believe that, like I said, I don't gatekeep the sport, but I do believe as a fan, you need to put in your dues to really appreciate a championship. Yes. To appreciate how hard it is to get there. So a cup final run is good, but they needed to experience loss just a little bit.
They will.
They will, which they have. They have. I mean, losing, the way they lost to the Sharks in 2019 and getting bounced 2 years, but getting bounced these past 2 years as well. They're earning it. The Vegas fans are earning it.
I can't wait until they're back in the Stanley Cup in like 2 years. And they're like, we've had 5 years of not getting to Stanley. And we're going to be like, excuse us. Okay.
They're going to be like, Leafs fans are going to be like, oh, I'm so sad for you. Oh my God.
Boy, we haven't even touched on them because they blow my mind.
A song on the smallest violin. Like, it's just, yeah. I mean, they're still going to be a good team. I mean, you've got a 1-2 goaltending tandem of guys that could be starters on any other team in the league. Like, that in itself is incredible. But just young, great talent, and like I said, it pains me to see Shea Theodore. William Karlsson is a guy that started with the Ducks. We won't get into. They made comments this year where they're like, "Oh, we feel like a chip on our shoulder because the Ducks traded us. They didn't want us." I'm like, "Okay, wow, Bill. Like, we traded you for James Wisniewski to the Columbus Blue Jackets when you were nothing. And then the Blue Jackets left you unprotected. Okay, let's calm it down here. Don't be too angry at us."
Yeah, you didn't end up in Vegas because of the Ducks.
Exactly.
Joe, before you go and pick your bone, I just have one more. I have one more off the cuff question because I think you are, you and Kaylee are our best hockey guests ever, right? So who would you say is the most obnoxious fan base in hockey and why?
I'm very curious for who Kaylee said. I think I've got an idea though. She definitely said Leafs fans, didn't she?
I wish I had asked her this question. It just literally just came up, but I want to hear your
Ooh, this is a good one. Because there's different levels of obnoxious,
right?
And this is a good one. You know, it kind of depends because some people take, passion and excitement for obnoxiousness. Some people, but I'm gonna go a little different here. And I don't think it's easy to say Leafs fans. It's easy to say, I could say Bruins fans, but I'm not going to do that because I don't believe it. I'm going to say Pittsburgh fans.
I can get behind
Pittsburgh fans.
I have a namesake on the Penguins, but
you do. I saw that. I was like, Malkin. Okay.
Yeah, there you go.
But here's the thing. I went to school in Pittsburgh. I lived there for 4 years, and I kind of had the Penguins as another team that I would root for because I lived my school was like right across the street from the arena. So went to games a lot, interned for the team. And let me tell you, the reason why they really rubbed me the wrong way is that, listen, I'm all for being a homer. I'm all for really loving your team, but to not be willing to extend or admit that there's talented players in the league outside of your own team is what really gets me. And let me put it this way. There's a few times where, and I get it, you do the Ovechkin sucks, the Giroux sucks chants. I get that part of being a fan, but I remember it was the 2014? It was the Sochi Olympics. And my boss for the Penguins was asking me, said, who do you think, Annie, who do you have in goal for Team USA? I was like, Jonathan Quick, like best goalie in the league.
Without a doubt.
About to be and he was like, you can't pick him. I was like, excuse me? He's like, he's the enemy. No, are you a real fan? You can't be. No. I was like, it's Team USA.
Yeah, we're talking about the national team. What are you talking about?
I was like, this is separate now. Like, they're friends now. Like, this is all. What? I was just so flabbergasted by that. And I forget, there was one other instance where this happened. I'm trying to. Oh, that's right. So I took like a sports media class, and we had people from the Penguins social media department come in. Now, mind you, this was 2012, 2014. And if you were on Twitter back then, this was when Kings Twitter and like the Blue Jackets Twitter were the really snarky accounts. And they were like making the funny tweets. And I asked the question where I said, listen, you kind of see the Kings and the Blue Jackets getting really experimental with their social media presence. What's stopping the Penguins from doing that? And they said point blank, and granted, they didn't know I was from California, but they said, well, no one really cares about hockey in Southern California, so they can get away with it. I was like,
wow.
I was like, not the most intelligent answer there. I'm sorry.
That's dumb.
But that's such a typical answer for a city, especially for hockey. In a city like Pittsburgh, Montreal, Boston, New York, like that's such a typical, because we don't think that, I say we as the collective, but the collective fans up north don't think that there should be hockey teams south of the Mason-Dixon. You know what I mean? Like that's a problem.
Exactly. And, it's just, for me, it's the horse blinders. It's the unwillingness to admit that anybody's better than anyone on your team. And also the hypocrisy too. I was there. They hated Marc-Andre Fleury, hated him, thought he was trash, thought he was inconsistent. Now, he gets left unprotected. He waives his no movement clause. He gets picked up by Vegas. He has a resurgence, and they have the audacity to say what happens in Vegas came from Pittsburgh. No. Pepperidge Farm remembers. We remember.
Annie, as the Counting Crows once said, you don't know what you got till it's gone. You pave paradise and you put up a punch.
Literally. But also, one of my favorite things, though, is amidst all these, John Gibson, my man Gibby here, is a Pittsburgh native. So amidst now where the Penguins have some mediocre goaltending at this point in time, the rumors are circulating and everyone's like, oh, you got to bring Gibby home. We want John Gibson in net. I'm like, the Penguins have nothing to offer the Ducks. Like, nothing, to the point where they would get Gibbs and they're like, no, Hextall's going to make it happen. He wants to come back to Pittsburgh. I'm like, okay.
See, but we have that problem in Boston too, where they gatekeep the rosters, gatekeeping again.
Yeah.
Where they gatekeep the rosters and think, oh, we can go out and get anybody we want, anybody that wants to come here. When Juju Smith-Schuster, Pittsburgh connection, was a free agent, everybody in Boston said, well, we're going to go get him because we're the Patriots. We have Bill Belichick. We're going to go get him. And he signs back in Pittsburgh, and it's like, well, that guy sucks anyway. We don't want him. And it's like, guys, you can't, just because you're in the city that you're in doesn't mean that you can offer. And I mean, don't even get us started on the Celtics and how nobody wants to come here for them. So
I just want to say, like, I would have given my left kidney for Sidney Crosby back in the day. Everyone,
without a doubt,
everyone in Boston always hated him, and they were like, "Oh, he's like, he's such a he's a bitch."
Baby Crosby, yeah.
No, he's actually pretty damn tough, and he's probably the best pure scorer that we had seen in such a long time. So yeah, you want someone like him on your team.
Those mid to late 90s Yankees teams, give me half of those teams. Even as a Red Sox fan, it's like, kidding me? Give me Mariano Rivera in a Red Sox uniform.
Exactly.
Well, yeah, fair, fine. Not an 04. Beat the crap out of him in 04. They can have him. Yeah. But no, you're absolutely. You know what? And it's funny because you spent 4 years in Pittsburgh. I love Pittsburgh. That's Western Pennsylvania is one of my favorite areas. We have family friends in Slippery Rock, beautiful campus up there. But that's a Western Pennsylvania thing. What you're talking about is like them believing they're better than everybody else and don't really know what's outside of like the Allegheny Rivershed. Like
I believe it.
They just don't. It's just how they are.
Yeah, I went to school with people that their plan was, no, why would you leave Pittsburgh? Why? Like, I'll get married here. I'll just stay here forever. Meanwhile, I was like,
and here the three of us from Boston are still in Boston.
Yeah.
Boston is very different from Pittsburgh.
Thank you. Good.
Great city, words. But I love Boston. Oh my God, I would pick Boston over Pittsburgh any day.
What's the favorite city? What's your favorite city that you've lived in? You've lived in so many, but not Boston.
Not Boston yet. Boston's on my list. But I thought I wanted to move to Boston right out of college. But I ended up getting a job in Chicago, which I loved. Loved Chicago.
Chicago's pretty cool.
Yeah. Affordable, fun, clean. Food's great.
Yep.
Couldn't be being fresh out of college, one of the best places to be. I liked New York. I did. I loved the freedom, the energy of the city. Didn't love the rent. Didn't love my job when I first got there. And yeah, it being really dirty and the apartments just being awful.
It's hard to maintain when you have to build up and you can't really do anything about it.
Exactly. I mean, the fact that, it is hard to see that, when you're in your late 20s and you have friends that are buying homes, that are settling down, and you're like, I still have 3 roommates and I'm paying rent in an awful apartment. But before COVID, you're barely in there anyway. So you're out around. I was in a boxing gym, so I was basically there a lot of the time. I would go work places. Like it just, you make this wherever you are, like in the city, you make the most of it. But yeah, the real estate situation, unless you're doing very well for yourself, which some people are, not too many people in New York, but some people are, unless you're doing pretty well for yourself, it's not exactly the most glamorous lifestyle. But
you're happy to be back home in Southern California, I assume.
I am happy to be back home in Southern California. It's not forever, I don't think. I think I could see long-term in Southern California, not long-term in San Diego, just given the opportunities for what I want to do with my career in terms of sport media. So we'll see. We've got a whole keeping an open mind. I've got some cities that I definitely won't go to, but keeping an open mind for the most part.
Well, come to Boston whenever you can. Now we're not ending it here, because speaking of coming home and coming to Boston, no, I'm not talking about the Euros. I am talking about one Chelmsford, Massachusetts native, Jack Eichel, who plays for the Buffalo Sabres at this point in time. Now, this is where I'm going to bring up your TikTok, at Sweet Annie OD on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. You made a video last week or the week before about Jack Eichel and his trade prospects. And you mentioned...
I left off a long list. I know.
The Ducks, the Blue Jackets, the Flyers, and the Kings. What the hell?
Yeah. The Flyers was a wild card I threw in there because somebody was like, no, I could see it happening. But thinking about it, Here's the thing. I think for Jack Eichel, there's got to be a few key things for a suitor. One is going to be you need the cap room with very limited cap penalties. So that leaves, with the news of Ryan Suter and Zach Parise being bought out, that automatically eliminates the Minnesota Wild. There's no way they can make that work, especially when you're trying to re-sign Kirill Kaprizov. But anyway, I think cap room, you need NHL ready prospects, like a very good prospect pool. And or the last one. Oh yeah, draft picks. You need you got to offer like a high first round, second round draft pick, because that's what Kevin Adams is going to be looking for in terms of a total return package. You're not going to get Jack Eichel in this return. And I think Sabres fans need to come to terms with that. Like, as a Ducks fan, which the Ducks have been confirmed to have been in on there, so don't give me a crap about putting them in there.
No. I was more worried about you not putting the Bruins in, because he said in an interview that he would love to at some point in his career play in Boston, but that doesn't mean it's going to be this year.
I was going to say, I believe at some point, if he wanted to, he could go back there. I just don't see it happening this year, just given the fact that the Bruins don't have a high first round pick in this year's draft. And I don't believe their prospect pool is top 10, top 15. I'm not an expert in drafts, just from what I've read. That's not what I've heard, but hey, I've been wrong before. Who knows what could happen? But I just feel like Sabres fans are being like, oh, for Jack Eichel, like, we want Trevor Zegras, we want Jamie Drysdale, and the Ducks have the 3rd overall pick in this year's draft. And they're like, and the 3rd overall pick. I was like, get bent. Like, no, we're not talking. Jack Eichel is not damaged goods. He is still an elite player. He's a top 10 center in the league. He doesn't always play like it, but he is. And he's not damaged goods, but he's on clearance right now. Sure. We know he's got a neck injury. We know there's discrepancy between the medical staff in Buffalo and his agent and his team. We know that any team that's going to come in is going to want to see those medical records and read them front to back multiple times to make sure they know there's a chance at recovery here. And there's not a chance that he comes and injures himself permanently, God forbid, in the next few years, or injures himself to the point where he's not worth $10 million. And then that's a whole list of problems. But also you got that no movement clause that's going to hit next year. So this is the year. And this is the time, frankly, for Kevin Adams to make a move to get the most return possible. Because if you wait for the trade deadline, you're limiting your suitors significantly. Because the only people that are going to try and go for Jack Eichel are people that are going to make a cup run. That are needing that guy to help them win the Stanley Cup. And you're not really going to get people, the teams like the Ducks, like the Blue Jackets, like the Kings, that have the prospects, that have the players, because they're sellers. They're not looking to go after a guy like Jack Eichel. So the return's going to be a lot less. So if I'm Kevin Adams, I'm making a move before the draft, preferably, if not before the season starts. Because, at that rate, hey, you get a Jack Eichel for a year. And if you don't like him, trade him before. A team that gets him can, if they want to, trade him before the no movement clause hits. But listen, why would you? Granted, I feel like that no movement clause is like kind of the dagger in there. I mean, you see it nowadays, especially recently within the last 9 days, how many players have been bought out because of these long-term deals. I mean, you see it in Buffalo with that Jeff Skinner, where they're leaving him unprotected. And they're, like I said, right, no way Seattle picks that up. No way.
Well, they went through in hockey such an era, and we saw it here in Boston, where Peter Chiarelli was signing awful deals, long deals, high money deals to the AAV. And it's part of the reason why we don't have those pieces that you're talking about to go and get Eichel. Right. Now, granted, the draft pick is based on the fact that Boston went to the playoffs this year, but more so, I mean, when you look at the minor leagues and what they have down in Providence, it's not enough. And that's partly because they're still rebuilding. Don Sweeney is still rebuilding from Peter Chiarelli's damage that he did before he took off to Winnipeg into the same thing.
Just remember, like, his damage included the likes of Tyler Seguin, some of the great players that are on the Bruins now, and Don Sweeney's. So Annie, I don't want to get too far into like a Bruins rabbit hole, but from an outsider's perspective, that 2015 draft where they had 3 chances, 13, 14, and 15, and they did, and then Barzell goes at 16. How offensive as a hockey fan is it to look back at that and say, like, why do you have a job, Don Sweeney? How can you have a job?
I mean, there's so many times. Granted, there's people whose literal career and job is to be prospect, is to be scout, to know who to pick at a certain place. I mean, listen, you're talking about the last time the Ducks had a really high pick was 2nd overall, and it was the Sidney Crosby lottery, and we grabbed Bobby Ryan. So I loved Bobby when he was here. Nowadays, though, if I'm looking back, Anze Kopitar went 11th. Like, you look at the list, Carey Price went further in that draft. You look at the other names in there. I don't get too hung up on that, but it is pretty funny to especially this year in the playoffs when Cole Caulfield dropped all the way and you see all the teams that passed on him. One of them was the Ducks, but they picked up Zegras. So,
all right. So Annie O'Donnell, as we've now basically covered the NHL from coast to coast. We've talked about Shohei Ohtani, Trevor Bauer. We've talked about Jack Eichel. Now we have a very important question for you.
Okay.
My first exposure to you was a few months ago during the lockdown. I was scrolling through Twitter, saw you, and you were doing one of those videos of yes, it was from the Mighty Ducks, where you were basically Gordon Bombaying, and you were reciting the entire scene, and I was like, that's what like turned me on to your podcast. And then I was like, all right, let's go. This is awesome. So the most important question we are going to ask you in this episode of Missing the Point, what is your favorite Mighty Ducks movie?
Joe. No way did you ask that question.
I did ask the question.
Go ahead.
D2. Easily.
It's the only answer.
Only
Mike's now
answer.
pissed at me about it. Right.
The order goes D2, the Mighty Ducks, and then down here, D3.
Okay, but is D3 really down there?
Yes. Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
When's the last time you watched it? Because I think it holds up.
I have it on Disney Plus. I watch the trilogy pretty regularly, my guy. I made a pretty popular TikTok about D3 also. It's bottom tier of the trilogy. There's no way my D2 is too good and Mighty Ducks is just too nostalgic for D3 to even compare. The only good things about D3 are Paul Correa's cameo. Love that. Julie the Cat Gaffney getting the rightful nod in net that she deserves, because let's be real here, she is miles ahead of Goldberg. Should have been in for the Junior Goodwill games more than that final shot against Gunnar Stahl. And then the other Bombay's gimmicks and mediocre coaching being exposed by Coach O'Ryan. Best part. And the most frustrating thing about the series was the gimmicks are still back. I was like, there's Gordon Bombay with his little gimmicks. The Flying V's coming out of nowhere. No way that would work. No way that would work in an actual game. How easy would it be to pick apart that whole entire thing? Oh, my God. But, yeah.
Well, Disney named an entire hockey team after the movie.
Indeed. I would... My very own, of course. And I understand that. Now, that's one thing that gets me... That really annoys me, and maybe I'll rant a little bit here. I don't care. But listen, I love the trilogy. I understand that they're the reason why Anaheim has a hockey team. And listen, hockey has grown exponentially, and the Ducks have been a huge part of that in Southern California. But one of my biggest pet peeves is, listen, I'm a passionate hockey fan. I pay attention. I like talking hockey with people, but I hate it when I say that I'm a Ducks fan or I talk about the Ducks. And people like to throw in there. They're like, oh, they should just go get Bombay to coach. Oh, go get the Bash. You need the Bash brothers. You need Conway, which Charlie Conway is my least favorite character in that movie for a multitude of reasons.
Is it because he was in Dawson's Creek?
No, it's because he was a whiny little brat in the third movie. And I'm just like, okay, real original. And they're like, no, like where's Bombay? Where's Charlie? Need the Flying V. It's like, shut up. But then also, like, so many people tell me, and at this point, it's sort of like when I hear from people think they're being like groundbreaking by saying like things like, oh, Friends isn't funny. I was like, okay. The Office is overrated. Okay, like, great. Everybody says that, and they're like, it's this groundbreaking take, like no one else has thought of it. I'm like, no, everybody else has said that. But the one thing people bring up to me all the time, they're like, oh, they need to go back to the original, Eggplant Jade, the original Mighty Ducks. The new ones are ugly. I was like, listen, I have so much vintage Mighty Ducks gear, but the new ones aren't ugly. Like, they're not that bad.
I like them.
Exactly.
I love the color scheme.
Not bad.
I think the
And
color
people
scheme
are like, they're disgusting. Worst logo. And they think it's just, they're like, oh no, they need, like, they're the first person ever think of it. Meanwhile, for the longest time, the Ducks were really thought of this Mickey Mouse team, this Disney team. They really didn't belong in the league. And the logo and the jersey itself was really ragged on. But of course now, I mean, the same thing goes for the fisherman logo for the Islanders. But now everyone's like, oh, it's great. It's the best in history, all this stuff. I'm like, okay. Yeah, now you didn't love it then, but you love it now? Okay.
Well, it's just like Marc-Andre Fleury in Pittsburgh. It's just human nature. It's just what people do, especially sports fans. We see it all the time. This is where we're going to have you back on and bring you on with Bobby during football season or something, because that would be a fun, because so many things you've said, I'm like, wow, Bobby would be triggered. And it's not even a bad thing. It's just we like getting Bobby riled up. So
is Bobby a Steelers fan?
No, he's the Cowboys.
Gotcha.
Now, Dave, the other one, our other buddy who's on here that lives in LA, he is a Chicago Bears fan.
Oh,
so yeah, I know. So he likes to send us things about Justin Fields all the time, and
his soon-to-be wife is a Steelers and Penguins fan. So your Penguin,
that's right.
Your Penguins take is I'm gonna love that. I can't wait for that.
My bad.
Nope. There's no. You could have ripped Boston for the last 70 minutes, and we would have been fine.
No, the thing I like about Boston fans is that, in which Pittsburgh fans, I'll do a counter for this. Boston fans, they know they're passionate. They own the mass whole thing. I'm all for that. That's why I have some respect for Philadelphia fans, is they know they're trash. They know that they're obnoxious and that people hate them, and they embrace it. Whereas Pittsburgh fans, they're like, we're classy. We're classy fans. We're a class organization. I was like, nah, you're just as trashy as they are. You just don't. You just won't admit it. You always say that you're classy. You think you're so holier than thou and better than everybody else.
I love Western Pennsylvania. There's not much classy about Western Pennsylvania.
No, there is not.
But in Eastern Pennsylvania, they throw beer at Santa Claus so they can screw.
And batteries at people.
And batteries at people. They did the same thing in Cleveland for a while too. But anyway, so we've covered just about everything in sports. Annie O'Donnell, we really appreciate you coming on. And if you've made it this far, Annie O'Donnell, content creator, sports analyst, host of the OD on Sports podcast. And we're definitely going to have you back on and keep this East Coast, West Coast thing going, especially during hockey season. We'll have to get you back on. We'll get you on during football season, and we'll get you on with everybody, because we like to have some fun and go back and forth. Mike is now pissed at me for asking you the Mighty Ducks question, so that's something I'm never going to live down.
Do you not like the Mighty Ducks?
No. The reason, before, and Craig, you're going to keep this. Do not cut this in post. Is I said before the show started, hey, I have one question that I really want to ask her, because she's a big Mighty Ducks fan. Is what's her favorite movie? And Joe's like, okay, Mike, you can ask that question. Then Joe's like, hey, Annie, what's your favorite Mighty Ducks?
He took your question. Oh,
I did.
Cool.
I also panicked when Craig panicked, because Craig panicking it makes me sad. So we don't want Craig to panic.
Question.
I did.
Contribution to the show. That's it,
Mike. It's fine. We'll talk about it at your wedding. So
okay.
I'm not invited to his wedding.
That's fair.
Yeah.
But anyway, so fair. We'll do this off air, man. So Annie O'Donnell, thank you for joining us here on Missing the Point. And before we go, of course, we want to let you kind of tell everybody what you're doing, where they can find you, and how people can listen to you.
Well, thank you so much for having me. This was an absolute blast chopping it up with you guys. You can find me on social media at Sweet Annie OD on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. I kind of don't really have a filter, and I like making a fool of myself. So if you like to be entertained, you like sports, you like music, you like classic rock or music that a 55-year-old divorced dad working in his car would like, I tweet about that a lot. So give me a follow. I usually follow back. And then my podcast is OD on Sports. It's available on all streaming platforms. And if you're not in the Orange County area, you can tune into 101.5 KOCI Sports Sunday on the website. And I think if you Google it, you can find the website. But I don't have the URL off the top of my head. But
well, that's where you can find Annie O'Donnell. And thank you again. So what's that?
Where I come in.
Where is that? Where do you come in? Oh, with the links down below. We didn't say it at all.
We also didn't swear.
I just yelled bitch like 10 seconds ago.
All right, well, fuck you too.
I mean, the thing I say the most is poop. It's what children do to you. So, but anyway, Annie, again, thank you for joining us on Missing the Point. For Mike Marcangelo, Craig D'Alessandro, and our guest, Annie O'Donnell, I'm Joe Malkin, and better than Evgeny, and we'll talk to you next time on Missing the Point.
Are you passionate about saving the planet for future generations? Do you want to learn how to do it? If yes, then you need to tune in to the Nature Back podcast. It's a talk show covering the changing world around us, from renewable energy, sustainable agriculture, circular economy, to ESG and social innovation. Don't miss this opportunity to discover how you can join the movement and make a difference. Subscribe to the Nature Back podcast today on your favorite platform and get ready to be amazed.
Welcome, explorers of the human experience. This is Let's Talk Soul, and I'm your host, Claudia Monticelli. We're not afraid of the great mysteries of existence here. Soul versus consciousness, we're on it. Spirituality versus science, we've got that covered too. Join us in navigating these profound topics with wisdom, curiosity, and a dash of audacity. Whether you're a spiritual veteran or just starting your journey, Let's Talk Soul is your passport to the unknown. Let's Talk Soul, diving into the depths of the human spirit. Subscribe now wherever you get your podcasts.
Electricast.